You know, I'm a little surprised I've never made this video before. Pennsylvania, my home state, home of both the Flyers and the Penguins, and also the Robert Morris University Colonials, which I decided to rep in this video. They've not only produced, again, 2 NHL teams, 3 or 4, including the Quakers and Pirates, but they've also produced a lot of players that have gone on to play in the NHL, and that's what I want to profile today. This isn't a revolutionary video idea by any means. There's a lot of publications out here who have already done this, so we're just going to jump right into things. I'm going to do 4 forward lines, 3 defensive pairs, and 2 goalies, and the criteria is simple. If you're from the state of Pennsylvania, you'll be considered for making this team. I'm not going over players who are like, oh, well, he is from Alabama, but then he moved to Pennsylvania. No, I'm using Hockey References list, which I will link in the description below, and I'm going off of what these players did in the NHL. Unfortunately, given that we're going over all of Pennsylvania, you like my little drawing of Pennsylvania? I think I did a pretty good job. We will be including some players from this area, but truth be told, and this isn't even trying to insult that side of the state, most of the good players from the west side, best sides, including our first player on this list, Brennan Saad, who's played the most games out of any Pennsylvanian-born player, 935 as of the 2025 offseason. A lot of these players are active. Brennan Saad is from the city of Pittsburgh. Out of all Pennsylvanian-born players, he is probably the most successful. He's got 2 Stanley Cups with the Blackhawks, and throughout his entire career, he hasn't been super all-star, Alex Ovechkin level, anything like that, but he has been just a solid scoring winger. He's currently on the Vegas Golden Knights, and is a good, in his prime, was a good 40 to 50 point producer. Another money in the bank 40 to 50, maybe even 60 point producer is Vinny Trocheck, who's currently on the New York Rangers and just has had an underrated solid career as like a second line center. Not a super all-star or anything like that, Sidney Crosby level or anything, but just a solid, good scoring center. He's only 31. He's already played 801 games. Saad is a little bit older than him, so he may pass Saad for the most all-time games played in Pennsylvania-born NHL player history. And he is, I don't know if I mentioned this before, he is from the city of Pittsburgh. Our first player that is retired is RJ Umberger. Umberger played 779 games played and is our first player on this list that has played for a Pennsylvanian team in the Flyers. He is, though, from Pittsburgh. Again, not a super all-star or anything like that, but a good, solid utility scoring winger, second, third line guy. I always hated him because he played for the Flyers, but he's from Pittsburgh, so there's nothing against him personally. I can't help but think, though, with RJ Umberger, the hit that Brian Campbell laid on him. Now, a lot of players, if you look at the entire list of players that are from Pennsylvania, you see a lot of familiar last names, such as the Malones. And Ryan Malone, being our next player, had a father, Greg, who played for the Penguins, and a lot of other players on the list, too. Oh, their father played for the Flyers or Penguins. And then they had a kid when they were playing for them, so they're automatically from Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. In Ryan Malone's case, he's from Pittsburgh. His father was Greg Malone, who's actually Canadian, but he was a good Penguins player, one of the better Penguins players in the 70s, 80s. Malone played 647 games in the NHL and was most notably, and he is our first player on this list to actually play for the Penguins. He was most notably a good early year Crosby player, at least what I remember him for. He did go on to have some great years with the Lightning. Again, not a super all-star or anything like that, but a good utility solid winger. And I've actually met Ryan. He's a very nice guy. He was at the RMU Celebrity Hockey Game. Now, given that this is my roster and my list here, I am going to prematurely put a player on here who I think may go down, at least in the next couple of decades, as the best player from Pennsylvania. I know it's early to say this because this player's only played 157 games played, but Logan Cooley really looks like a player, and he's also from the city of Pittsburgh. He's going into his 3rd year with, I guess, now the Utah Mammoth, drafted by the Coyotes. Now that that whole situation is figured out, I really think Utah has a great young team, and I think Logan Cooley's probably the first-line center for that team going forward. He scored 65 points this past year, and I'm looking for him to be a point-per-game player. Really, I have high expectations for this kid, and I'm rooting for him. I'd probably root for him even if he wasn't from Pennsylvania. But obviously, there's a lot of connection. He was in, like, the Sidney Crosby academies and growing up. And heck, I want to get really into, like, alternate history. Does Logan Cooley even get on this board if Sidney Crosby doesn't exist? Our next player is the first player that is not from the city of Pittsburgh. He is from Western Pennsylvania, though. George Peros, most notably now the current head of the NHL Department of Player Safety. Peros played 474 games in the NHL. He is from Washington, Pennsylvania, this is Pittsburgh. He's kind of down here in even southern Western Pennsylvania. Peros is also our first player on this list that wasn't really a scorer. He had 36 points in his entire 470 game plus career. He was a grit grinder and an enforcer. He did win a Stanley Cup on 2007 with the Ducks. Great mustache. Now on to our first player, who I had never heard of before I started researching this video, Gary O'Flaherty, who played 438 games played and is from the city of Pittsburgh. He spent the bulk of his career with the Canucks in the 70s, never won a Stanley Cup because Canucks. But from what I can tell, I probably know about as much as you guys know about this player. He was a good 30 to 40 point player, so like a third, fourth line guy in the 70s, and he's on our list. This is a player that I really like. I've always liked. Probably most notably because he played for the Penguins, but I always liked his game, and that is Sam Lafferty. Lafferty's not from Pittsburgh, but he's from Hollidaysburg, which is like here, probably like near his name. Another active player, Lafferty is at 349 games played as of right now. He just went back to the Chicago Blackhawks, and he did play for the Penguins. He was drafted by the Penguins and started his career there. As any hockey roster goes, as the further you go down in the lineup, the less points these guys score. Lafferty, not a big point producer, but a good third liner. That's why I put him on the third line player. And he's a player that I think would really excel in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Next, we have Jay Caulfield, who is another player that I'm sure Penguins fans are familiar with, not only because he played for the Penguins and won a Stanley Cup with them, but he is still part of the Penguins broadcast team today with Sportsnet Pittsburgh now. Caulfield has worked more games in the media business than he did played in actual NHL games, though. He only played 208. And he is our first player that is from Philly. Only scored 13 points in his entire career, but good vital guy to some very important Penguins teams in Penguins history. Hopefully when I make this video, or if I do anything similar in like 20, 30 years from now, we don't really have to scratch the bottom of the barrel, but we are honestly kind of scratching the bottom of the barrel here as we get to the fourth line and put Pete Babando on the team. He is another player I never heard of. He played in the 40s and 50s, but he played 351 NHL games, which is more than a lot of us can say. He is from Brayburn, which is in the greater Pittsburgh area. If this is Pittsburgh, he's kind of like over here. Next is Eric Tangradi. Another former Penguin, another player I've met. Only 150 games played and 16 points in his career. And he's from the other side of the state in Philly. Most notably, at least to me, involved in a Penguins trade tree that I just went over in a previous video. Last player, Erwin Boyd, only played 94 games in the NHL. He's from Ardmore, which is in the greater Philadelphia area. That'll round out our forward lines. Onto the defensive pairs. Mike Weber was a pretty serviceable NHL defenseman who played just over 350 games. He kind of went under the radar because he played for the Sabres, of all teams, but had a good 8-9 year career there in the 2010s. He is from the city of Pittsburgh. I have him paired up with Bob Beers, great last name, who played 258 games played, most notably for the Bruins. Actually, his entire career was with the Bruins. And Beers is also from Pittsburgh. Then you got Matt Bartkowski, 256 games played, also from Pittsburgh. So for these first three guys, nobody super groundbreaking or anything, but again, these guys are NHL players that had solid NHL careers. They weren't fringe healthy scratches, at least for the most part of their career, but also at the same time, we don't have Erik Karlsson from Pittsburgh or anything like that. Now, similar to what I said with Ryan Malone, here's another case of a player who had a father that played for either the Penguins or Flyers. In this case, the Flyers. He also did play for the Penguins, though. Kjell Samuelsson's kid, Mattias Samuelsson, who right now is only 25, but has played 212 games in the show. And given that he was born when his daddy was playing for the Flyers, he's from Philly. He's probably the Logan Cooley of the defense. Up-and-coming young player that I'll keep an eye on and maybe could be our top defenseman if we do this in a couple of years. Finally, our last defense pair, we got a former Penguin in Nate Gennin, who played 205 games, who's from Western Pennsylvania, but not Pittsburgh. He's from Aliquippa, which is kind of here-ish. Also from here-ish is Stephen Johns from Elwood City. 167 games played for him. And yeah, the defense is not as impressive, I guess you would say, as the first couple of players in the forward group, but Finally, wrapping things up with the goaltenders, probably maybe the best player in this entire team is Mike Richter, who's from Philly but played his entire career with the New York Rangers. Played 666 games played, and most notably won the 1994 Stanley Cup with the Rangers. I wouldn't consider him a Hall of Famer, but he's definitely a legacy name player, especially for the Rangers. He's so good, in fact, that he knocked out John Gibson, who was a great goaltender in himself. He knocked out John Gibson to being our backup. Gibson's up to 506 games, again as a goalie, and is just now moving on to his second ever team in his career, being traded from the Ducks to the Red Wings this past offseason. He is from Pittsburgh. And I think the ship has sailed on him ever coming to Pittsburgh. I know, at least I was making rumors about him potentially being a fit after the Fleury-Murray years. Now he's in his early 30s, and the Penguins aren't really looking to contend anytime soon. But that'll do it for your all-Pennsylvania team. A couple more things I want to mention here, because I didn't include every player from the state of Pennsylvania that went on to make it to the NHL. This is just what I would put out there if I was head coach making a roster. I would like to give a shout out to Justin Mercier, who's from Erie, Pennsylvania, which is the closest to like where I grew up. So I'd like to give him a shout out, even though we only played 9 games. There are no Hockey Hall of Famers on this list, and I really don't think there's any player that you can even argue. Maybe Logan Coley if he like really starts lighting it up, but it's hard to make the Hall. And again, there's only going to be better and better players, hopefully, from the state of Pennsylvania. We do have a lot of Stanley Cup winners. I'm going to go over every single one of them real quick. Pete Babando won it with the 1950 Red Wings. Jay Caulfield, technically speaking, only has 1 Stanley Cup with the 1992 Penguins. Mike Richter, famously with the 94 Rangers. George Peros with the 2007 Ducks. And Brandon Saad with the 2013 and 2015 Blackhawks. And then real quick, I want to go over every player that's played for the Penguins. Jay Caulfield, Ryan Malone, Bill Thomas, who is not on our list, who played for the Penguins from 08 to 09, Nate Gennon, Eric Tangradi, Dylan Reese, who did not make our team, 2012-2013 for him, Sam Lafferty, and then a fascinating player who never played for the Pittsburgh Penguins, but did play for the Pittsburgh Pirates, who's also from the state of Pennsylvania. Jesse Spring played from 1925-26, and then also 28 to 30 for the Pittsburgh Pirates. That was almost 100 years ago now. But yeah, that'll do it. I love the state of Pennsylvania. I'm very happy that this is where I was born and raised. And while not every player here has played for the Penguins, there's a little bit of pride for me, even if they do play for the Flyers. Just given that they're from my home state. If you want me to do the Nevada version of this, given that's the other state that I've lived in, there's one player, and his name was Gage Quinney, who did play for the Golden Knights, but that's the only player in their history. Who's your favorite player from this list? What player do you think will emerge as the next good player that'll join this list? Yeah, thank you guys all for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Go Pennsylvania, and go Penguins.